the President gives his State of the Union address 2 weeks before across-the-board spending cuts are about to hit. He'll have to talk about that, obviously. Does it look like they're going to be able to avert this, or are we going to have to live with the pain of these cuts?
I mean, if you're looking at the odds, I say it's not a cliff, but I say this sequester.
We did the cliff.
Yeah, we did the cliff. Yeah. It seems to me that these things happen. I mean, in part because if you listen to the Democratic side, what Harry Reid's been saying or what the President's been saying, it's this whole balanced approach, which we heard before. We want there to be cuts, yes, we want it to be done in a managed way, but we also want there to be new revenues, tax loophole cuts, etc. And on the Republican side, they've done that. They've gone down, they're like, no, we're not talking about revenues, we're talking about spending cuts. So it's hard to see how they figure out some way to avert this in the next 3 weeks.
Right, the President this week tried to lay out a plan. He said, you know, let's not create another self-inflicted wound. There's a way out of this to at least delay the sequester, and he laid out some cuts and more tax increases, and the Republicans said, we're not playing ball on that. We're not going to do more tax increases. We're willing to let the sequester go into effect. And I mean, at this point, they seem dug in far apart, and it doesn't appear that there are a lot of behind-the-scenes negotiations
Well, what
happening.
happened to the idea that Republicans would object to these across-the-board spending cuts taking place because they were designed to bite so heavily into the military?
That was a big line, as you remember. We all remember
Right.
during the campaign. I mean, that was one of Romney's main lines in there, and they're sort of reviving this. This is Obama's sequester. It was his idea originally. He owns it, and that was very much Romney's line. But in the end, I think most Republicans now we back cuts, and these are some serious cuts, and for us to just like somehow or other work to make these cuts go away would be against what we're all about.
I mean, it's funny. It's not really funny. It's kind of sad, actually. When this first sequester was put into place, I think that there was still some optimism in Washington that the parties could kind of get together and come up with a reasonable solution, reasonable compromises, which really, if you look at the history of Washington over many years, that's what usually happens, is that people compromise and meet somewhere in the middle. And that was, they couldn't quite get it done back in August of, I guess it was 2011, but hey, they said, we'll have this looming and we'll all work it out. There was the super committee. Anyway, all of this stuff has happened since then, and I just think that most people have lost confidence that Washington today has the ability to compromise and find a middle ground.
Right, so then what happens is the spending cuts go into effect. We'll hear lots of hue and cry. The Pentagon's already announced that they're not going to send some aircraft carrier to the Middle East, you know, the most highly symbolic thing they can think of. I'm sure they'd be closing the Washington Monument if it weren't already closed for repair. and then we'll have this period of time where the House and Senate budget committees put up budget resolutions, which may be the process by which they undo these cuts and replace them with some other ones.
Well, yes, but they have to, the House and the Senate each have to do that, and then they have to agree. You know, I think that the language of they're mandated to each come up with a budget, but doesn't mean that they have to actually come up with a common budget, does it?
Right.